Welcome back, everyone. Let's continue our discussion about lighting controls and the California Energy Standards. As you can imagine, the requirements for non-residential projects are more complicated than those for homes. And they really depend on exactly what kind of project you're working on, what size, what occupancy type, what building type. All right, but there are some commonalities, and we're going to talk about it kind of in a high level view here. So what you see is a table that I've put together coming from your non-residential lighting guide that talks about the categories of requirements and gives a short description of what they are. And then we're going to go into more detail about kind of those top four, the most important and the most common lighting control requirements. So starting with those four, manual area controls are all about separating the different control systems for each area and for each function. Multi-level controls are the requirement for dimmable or stepped lighting. And automatic shutoff controls is a requirement to automatically reduce lighting power when a space is unoccupied by shutting it off. Automatic daylight controls is a program where the general lighting of a room is going to be reduced when natural light is available. So when the sun is up and you have light coming in through your windows, we want to use that light. Some of the less common or harder to understand control requirements include the automated demand response. This is a program for a larger building to work with a utility company and reduce their lighting and reduce peak demand in emergency situations and when it's needed. The requirement for control interactions is pretty new to our California codes, and it means that all of the different functions of these lighting control systems need to work together. All right. Institutional tuning controls is a fancy word for saying that some controls need to really only be available to authorized users and not to the general public. And finally, there's a requirement for lighting controls acceptance tests. This is part of a commissioning program, and so it's required that you test your controls and make sure that they actually operate per the energy code requirements. All right, so that was a long list of requirements. Let's dig a little deeper into the first one, which was manual area controls. This one's pretty easy to understand. It's required that you have separate control systems for each room or area of a building. All right, and that control system has to include a manual on and off. This is very much like the residential, okay? And that has to be in the same room or area as the lighting it controls. This is a little special. It's because the building could be quite large, and you want to make sure that someone leaving that area can go ahead and turn it off without going somewhere else and finding the lighting control. Under this category is also separate control of the different lighting systems. All right, and this could be thought of as the layers of light. For example, you want separate controls of your general lighting, that would be your ambient layer, and your display lighting. A last caveat here, your egress lighting, your safety lighting, doesn't have to comply with any of these rules. Our next category of mandatory requirements for non-residential lighting control systems, are multi-level controls. Again, this is pretty easy to understand. In most applications and most locations, it's required that you use dimmable or stepped lighting controls. There is a very complicated table all about the different requirements, how many steps, how dimmable something has to be. In general, it varies by lighting type. All right. And the other requirement is that a user must be able to actually use these controls and activate the steps. All right, there are some exceptions. The exceptions are mostly for very small areas, very low amounts of lighting. Also, restrooms don't have to be dimmable, healthcare, and some specific other exceptions. The fourth category I want to talk about is the automatic shutoff controls. These are required in most applications, and they can come as automatic time switches, like, okay, it's 9 p.m., all of our lights are going to turn off, or occupancy sensors, as in no one has been in this room for 20 minutes, now we're going to turn the lights off, or there are some other less common controls that can be used. It's important that a separate shutoff control be used for each enclosed area or room and every building floor, with an exception of stairwells. And a maximum amount of 5,000 square feet can be covered by a single control. So if you have a really big floor plate, you're going to need more than one of these. There's a couple of exceptions. Egress lighting, again, for safety is accepted. And if you have specifically an area that is always going to be in continuous use, you don't have to put in these shutoff controls. The last category of mandatory requirements for non-residential buildings that I want to talk about is automatic daylighting controls. Automatic daylighting controls is a way to use the free light that we get from the sun. All right, and so we use these controls to adjust the general or ambient layer of lighting within a room when the daylight is available. So one of the requirements is that you maintain the designed light levels for each space, but you use these controls to reduce the general lighting power in, and they call it a daylit zone. Daylit zone is one that has some daylight coming into it. All right. And the way we do that is to use photo sensors for each zone. Daylighting controls are required for all luminaires that are in these categories. They are providing general lighting, they're in rooms with windows, and there is a minimum of at least 120 watts of lighting. It's not very much, as you know. When you're designing your daylighting controls, you're going to divide your room into different zones. One zone is called skylit, and as you can imagine, that is everything that is under a skylight. Another zone is called primary side lit zones, and so the light is coming from the side. In essence, this is the part of your room that is next to the windows. And there's also a secondary side lit zone. It's not next to the windows, but it's like window adjacent. All right. And remember that the requirement is you provide a photosensor for each of these defined zones. Just like for the residential lighting guide, your non-residential lighting guide provides several examples of lighting plans and the associated lighting schedule. So I just wanted to call your attention to this awesome resource. All right, everyone. In this video, we covered the mandatory requirements for lighting controls here in California for non-residential buildings. There's a whole laundry list of these requirements, and we just covered the top most important or most common. Thanks, everyone.